like a year earlier, we were supposed to hook up, and now it's a year later, and we're still friends. But she's dating a very dear friend of mine, a fucking guy that we used to call like Godzilla. He was so fucking big. And I'm talking to her down the show, and somebody told him they were up like all night talking, and we weren't up all night talking. She had gotten back from something at like 6 in the morning, and I was still up from the night before, and we were in a fucking living room down the shore at a fucking house, just bullshitting, and somebody told the guy, so he came and threatened me, stop talking to her, and I'm like, dog, I was sitting there with 3 friends, and she came in and started talking to us, which was the truth. And then she was embarrassed, so we didn't talk for like another year. It was the craziest fucking thing in the world. Then they broke up. Then they started breaking up in high school. And then she would talk to me. And I was still a little upset about the fucking thing when I talked to her. And I didn't try to hit on her or nothing. So I kind of stayed away from her. One day she just fucking, I was living with the Runnies, and she just came over. And she's like, listen, man, I know we've had a bumpy history, you know, but I'm very fond of you. And I'm sitting there going, I got no money. I'm living in my friend's basement. What is this girl talking about? You know, why does she fucking continue to, I don't know. We never had sex, nothing. But we used to talk. And then when I moved with the Runnies, she lived around the corner. So we made a deal that we would work out every night. Right, like we would get back in tune and work out. So we would go to Hudson County Park where the Martians landed, and we'd run around the lake every night, and then on the way home we'd stop at Carvel and we'd smoke pot and we'd just talk. And if anybody knew my deepest, darkest secrets at the time, it was her. I was going through hell with my stepfather. I was going through hell without my mother. I was telling her all this shit that I was going through. And then it came time to graduate high school, and she was dating a guy. I guess she went back with that same boyfriend. So it was like an apprehensive relationship with me and her. But finally one day she told the boyfriend, who was a dear friend of mine, who I went to grammar school with, what the fuck was up. And he finally goes, I get it. All right, you guys are friends. And we were. We fucking definitely were friends. And the whole time, there was one time we thought about swap and spit. But we were friends, man. And good friends, like just good friends. And then we started going out at night. We would all go out in a group, me, her, 6 other girls. Nothing ever happened. We'd go out, snort coke, smoke pot, eat Quaaludes. I mean, we were having a good time. We were fucking kids, you know. And then I went, as I was getting ready to go to Colorado in '83, I started talking to her more and more. She was unhappy with her boyfriend at the time. She was unhappy with like her career and shit like that. And we would talk in the afternoons. We'd go get a hash-away sandwich once a week. At night, we'd be together. I mean, 2 nights a week she was with her boyfriend, but the other 5 nights she was always with me. And I don't know, it kind of got a little weird before I left. We started going into those conversations of dating again. But you know what? I had to get the fuck out of here. I was dying. I wasn't making any progress. So I fucking left. And I left on April 5th, 1983, which is her birthday. So I still remember getting in the car and giving her like a birthday card and hugging her and telling her I'd be back soon and shit, but I wasn't coming back. I didn't know what I was doing. And when I went to Colorado, to Aspen, we talked every week. Every week. We would talk on the phone for like an hour. How you doing? And she was struggling. I was lonely, not being around my North Bergen friends and shit. And finally I came back. And I mean, if I got back on a Sunday night, I saw her an hour or 2 after I landed. And we were inseparable for those 2 weeks, and nothing happened. And she was one of the reasons that I fucking stayed. It was her and Let the Music Play, that song. I heard that song out at my friend's house, and I'm like, how can I go back to Colorado with this music playing? The coke is so good. The Quaaludes are bumping. What am I going to do in Colorado? Ski? But the real reason was I wanted to get, I was ready for a girlfriend, a full-time girlfriend. So when I came back, we made the mistake and started fucking dating. And I loved her, and she loved me, man. We were having a great time, but you know what? We were into drugs. I was into drugs. She didn't know how bad I was into drugs. And after a couple months, it just didn't work out. I was fucking homeless half the time. Sometimes I had an apartment. I think the worst thing I did was after we broke up, she fucking hated me, and I kept trying to force the hand. And I'll tell you what, it wasn't that she hated me as much as she was disgusted in me, because I had the world by the balls and I was doing drugs and I wasn't paying attention, and everybody was trying to offer me jobs and I wouldn't take them. So I'll never forget, I took her to a New York Net game. The Nets were playing the Sixers or somebody out here at the Meadowlands. It had to be November of '84. I was in bad shape. I had picked up an ounce of Coke at 11 in the morning, and now it was 7 o'clock at night, and I was down to a half ounce of Coke. And I took her to this game, and at the first period, I've talked about this before, I got up to get us drinks, and I ended up getting the fucking waiter coked up at the Meadowlands Arena. I got up in the beginning of the first quarter, and I didn't come back till there was 2 minutes left in the game. She was pissed. She made me drive her home. She told me to fuck off and the whole thing. And I was fucking heartbroken. And then at the end of my homelessness, I ended up going to a party like December 29th or something like that of '84. And she was there with a new boyfriend, and I made a fucking jerk out of myself. I started crying, the whole fucking thing. You know, I'm not embarrassed to say so. We're all fucking idiots from time to time. Listen, man, I was homeless. I was in bad shape, physically and mentally, and I just put a lot of hope into it. And I knew how much she liked me. You know, and that night we had a little bit of an argument. I said, fuck her. I'm not going to talk to her no more. I can't believe she did this to me in my lowest point. I moved to Colorado, and years later, when I was about to get married, one of my friends came to the wedding, and he pulled me aside, and he goes, hey, man, I talked to Lisa the other day. She sends her love, and she says to call her before you get married. And I was like, what? And she goes, call her before you get married. She wants you to call her and talk to her before you commit to this marriage. And I'm like, I'm not calling that fucking bitch. You know, I'm not going to call her. I ended up getting married, and then years later I got divorced, and then when I came back here 30 years ago, I got a job working at a deli. I was embarrassed. I didn't want anybody to know. And one day as I'm walking out to get in the car, she's outside, and she's like, hey, man, what are you doing? She's like, I heard you're back in town, and you're working here, and I told her how embarrassed I was, and the fucking whole thing, and you know, we became tighter than ever. She picked me up that night, and she introduced me to her husband. She goes, I want you to meet my husband. You know, he's a good guy. He wants to meet you. I told him all about you, and I met him, and I got it. You know, I wasn't jealous. I wasn't upset. I wasn't anything. She had done great with her life, you know. And then I left, and I started doing comedy, and she would come to my shows with her husband. And I wasn't very good then, but she would support me. This is before anybody would come to my shows. She would come to shows when I was a fucking feature act and shit. She would go to Bananas and fucking the other place in West Orange. I forget what his name. Anyway, she would go to all those clubs. She went to Sea Caucus, to Hula Hands to see me once, and I got booed. And she was always my friend and shit, you know. And then, like about maybe 15 years ago, my friends were at a barbecue at some party, and some other guys were talking some shit about me, and she fucking read them a fucking riot act. Like, she's like, fuck you motherfuckers. You don't know what he's been through in his life as a kid, his stepfather. I mean, she knew everything. She knew what I was suffering. You know, I would only tell her, you know. And it got back to me that she stuck up for me. And I called her up and I go, hey, man, I heard what happened at that party. I know who was talking shitty about me. And I know that you went on a fucking hook for me. Thank you. And she's like, don't worry about it. They don't know dick, blah, blah, blah. So this girl had my back when there was nothing. There was no storytelling. There was no longest yard. There was nothing. She was already telling people, go fuck yourself. He's going to do great. Shut the fuck up. What have you done with your life? I mean, she was already batting for me. So when I got Spider-Man 2, I got invited to the cast and crew. I really couldn't do nothing. You know, I just took my wife. Cast and crew is like a fucking washed up premiere, you know, without the lights and the photographers and shit. You just go there. They don't give you nothing to eat. They don't give a fuck about you. But I don't give a fuck. But for the longest yard, they told me I could bring 8 people. I don't know if you guys know this. I brought 7 guys and 1 girl. And that girl was my friend Lisa. Because she believed in me so fucking much. I didn't even take my wife to that fucking premiere, but I took this girl to that premiere. That's just to let you know. I took her to that one. I took, I think, 6 of my friends and 1 of the teachers. I think I took Mr. T to that one. And then for the grudge match premiere in New York City, I brought Mercy's godfather. I brought Mr. T. No, I brought Mr. Barone, my other teacher. And I brought Lisa. She never brought her husband to any of the premieres. She always went with me.